So the truth about Israel has become just impossible to ignore, and there's been a lot of people waking up to that reality and talking about that reality. And look, a lot of it, don't get me wrong, is some Johnny-come-lately stuff, and it's kind of annoying when you have, like, Hakeem Jeffries releases some mealy-mouthed statement after 2 years of a genocide live-streamed in Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. But what that means is they're realizing, hey, man, we know how history's going to view this, and it ain't going to be pretty. So we got to be on the record to one extent or another saying, we're against it, right? But John Stewart and Peter Beinart are both people who've been, talking about this issue for a while and have been saying good things about it and have been on the right side. And they had a really interesting conversation here about what's happening in Gaza. So I want to watch it and then break it down. Here we go.
You are Jewish. I am Jewish. People yell at me about what I say sometimes about Palestine and what's going on in Israel, and they call me a bad Jew. Apparently, you can lose points. What are you experiencing as someone who is writing very clearly about your upset at what is occurring in Gaza?
Well, I have lost, some pretty close friends over this, but I also don't worry about having to feed my kids. They're not starving.
Right.
They're not being killed. I have freedom. I really have an incredibly fortunate and blessed life. And even though it's hard sometimes to have other Jews really not like me because Judaism is everything to me. It's at the center of my life. I've also met so many other people from so many different walks of life who care about the same things that I do, who believe that all human beings are created in the image of God. And I know a lot of people caricature a lot of these people who care about Palestinian rights and freedom as like being anti-Semitic. Mm-hmm. But to be honest, the vast, vast majority of people I meet, they strike me as like the kind of people who would have stuck up for us when we were in trouble. The kind of people who are willing to risk something because when they see people suffering and being abused, they act. And those are the people who I want to be around.
You bring up such an interesting point because it does cut to the idea of who qualifies as a good Jew and a bad Jew. And admittedly, I don't know all the different things in the nuance of the history here or what happened in '93 at the agreement that might have turned, but I know what I'm seeing. And I have a moral clarity about what I'm seeing. And what I'm seeing, I think, as someone who was raised in Judaism, that's what taught me that this is wrong. What I'm seeing happening in Gaza is wrong. We learn, in Judaism, it's funny, you learn that you're the underdog. That's kind of the history.
Right.
And it's interesting because what John Stewart is saying is that perspective, that mindset of learning that we were the underdog, that led me to sympathize with other underdogs, right? And that made me realize that, like, hey, we never want to be victimized again, but we don't want other people to be victimized either, right? So that's what John Stewart's perspective is. There are plenty of people, though, who, if they're raised with the mindset of you're the victim, you're the perpetual underdog, they will believe that even when they become the victimizer, right? And that's kind of what we're witnessing here, is that you have the memory of the Holocaust lingers, and you have these extremist Zionists who are using that legacy to say, well, never again, and if never again means we become the Nazis, so be it. You understand what I'm saying?
I always looked at the chosen people as kind of a wry. When you read the history of the Jews, you're like, you're the chosen people, and you want to say to God, like, if you could choose someone else. But what happens when David becomes Goliath? Yeah. And the responsibility there, is that what troubles you?
Yeah, our responsibility is to remember what was done to us, to remember what we would have wanted people around the world. I'm not saying that what's happening in Gaza is the equivalent of the Holocaust or anything like that, but what's happening in Gaza is bad enough.
It may be.
It is. We can't do this shit anymore. It's like, oh, well, maybe it's not exactly as bad. Like, we're not doing that. It's fucking horrific what we're witnessing. And it is akin to that. It just is.
But what's happening in Gaza is bad enough.
It may be a slow-mo. I saw an article in the Times, Bret Stephens, I think, and his argument was this can't be a genocide because Israel's so strong they could kill them much quicker.
Right.
And I thought, well, that's the most cynical description of a military siege and a purposeful starvation that I've ever seen in my life.
When people say, like, well, they didn't kill all of them, they didn't kill, like, literally every single one of them, it's like, well, Hitler literally didn't kill all the Jews. Like, what are we talking about here? Is that your bar, that you need to purposefully kill literally every single one in order for it to count as a genocide? Because that's not the definition. The definition is killing in whole or in part. That's what Hitler did, and that's what Netanyahu is doing right now.
Israel's leading human rights organization, B'Tselem, has just come out with a report saying they believe this is genocide. So it seems to me if we want to remember our history, if we want to honor those in our own families and of our people who were slaughtered and who were genocided, who were starved to death while nobody in the world cared, our obligation is to care. Our obligation is to risk something.
Listen, man. This has rocked I feel like a crazy person. I feel like I'm watching something that is so self-evidently inhumane and horrific, and to be told that I have to shut up because I risk the Jewish state by speaking out, I would say the opposite.
I think we've all had that experience, right, where we feel like we're crazy because we see what's happening and it's changing us, and we're trying to point it out and say, hey, guys, do you see this shit? Like, this has got to stop. And then, like, you just hit a brick wall where nobody cares, nobody does anything, and they look at you like you're crazy. And it's like, how are we just all supposed to go along and pretend like we didn't just see kids with their heads blown off and, toddlers underneath rubble and pregnant women being murdered and kids being shot in the face and over 20 hospitals being bombed and schools being bombed and UN buildings being bombed and World Central Kitchen workers being bombed? Are we all just supposed to act like this isn't happening? Like, what are we talking about? It is a mass gaslighting effort. The propaganda from Israel is like a mass gaslighting effort where they try to use their propaganda to shut you up or at least get you to feel like, hey, they're going to accuse me of being a Hamas apologist or an anti-Semite, so I at least got to shut up about it. Or they want to force you to the position where you go, it's complicated. It's not a black and white issue. There's shades of gray. It's very complicated. So, I'll just rest on that. As you see children getting carpet bombed on a daily basis and people literally starving to death right in front of your eyes. It's complicated. I don't know, man. That seems like the opposite of complicated to me. That seems like the least complicated thing I've ever seen in my entire life ever.
I think they're putting the likelihood of a surviving Jewish state much more at risk with this type of action. I think they're the ones that are being if you want to define Netanyahu, with the definition of anti-Semitism, would probably have to bomb himself.
I mean, Martin Luther King said that white and black Americans were bound up in a single garment of destiny, right? Palestinians and Israeli Jews, and in some ways Jews around the world, we're bound up in a single garment of destiny. If we want Israeli Jews to be safe, and I care passionately about the safety of Israeli Jews, in the long term, Israeli Jews are only going to be safe if Palestinians are going to be safe. And Palestinians can't be safe unless they're free. If they're under oppression, if they live under conditions that even Israel's own human rights organizations called apartheid, they are suffering radical amounts of violence all the time, even before October 7th. Do we think, when we think about all these kids in Gaza who are watching their parents starving to death, who are watching dozens of their family members being killed, is that good for Israel? Is that good for Israeli Jews in the long term? How you treat people has an impact on how they treat you.
So I know it gets kind of grating to have them center Israel, and that it kind of rubs me the wrong way in the midst of a genocide where innocent Palestinians are being killed on a daily basis to center Israel. But at the same time, I don't think this segment is for me. I think that they're doing this segment to sort of go after anybody who's like maybe a liberal Zionist, who's sort of still hanging on to, this notion of Israel as a beacon of progressivism. I think the segment is for them to be like, hey, wake up. Even from your perspective, this isn't good for what you view as the future of Israel, right? But, just broadly speaking, I don't know, at a time when Israel is doing a genocide and killing Palestinians, it does sort of come across as tone deaf. It's like talking about, is this good for regular Germans? As the Nazis shove people into gas chambers. It's like, regular Germans are not really my fucking concern at the moment. It's kind of the people who are being shoved into the gas chambers. It's the Jews who concern me at that moment. And in this moment, it's the fucking Palestinians who are being starved to death who have my concern, right? They're the top of the priority list. Forgive me for that.
And if you want Israeli Jews to be safe, Palestinians also have to be safe.
How does and look, listen, this is a tough conversation because we are two people that I think see this situation very similarly.
Right.
I obviously see it from a more secular perspective because I am, even before Gaza, a bad Jew. First night of Passover for me was like meatball Parmesan hero. I was not good. I was not good. But you see, all of our holidays, the whole entire ethos for me of being Jewish, and I don't doubt that there are people that have a radically different interpretation than I do. But it's all about like, we were about to be wiped out. We were in a cave. We had 3 days of oil. And then suddenly the Maccabees overcame it all. Or Purim, Esther, she was almost destroyed by Haman and the Jewish people, but she went to Mordecai. And now we wear costumes and do, like, it was always like, oh, they almost got us, but wait.
Right.
It's more complicated than that, isn't it?
It's true, because if you read the Hebrew Bible, if you read the Talmud, what you see is that our religious texts describe us in the full range of humanity. We're human beings. Nothing human is alien to us. We can be horribly victimized, and our texts talk about that. But the end of the book of Esther, from which the Purim story comes, also ends with a massacre by Jews of the Jews' enemies. The story of Hanukkah and the story of the Chazmonaim, the Maccabees became in power, it moves from them liberating the Jewish people to them becoming oppressors themselves. So part of recognizing us as human, as Jews, as fully human, is recognizing that we are capable of being victims and being victimizers. And we have to recognize that in order to prevent us from falling into the trap of thinking that every single situation is the equivalent of what was happening in the Tsarist Russia or in Nazi Germany. Right. In some situations, the power dynamic is reversed. In Israel-Palestine, it's Jews who all enjoy legal supremacy and citizenship, and Palestinians who are denied basic rights. And we have to recognize that that's possible, and we have to fight against it for our own sake and for the sake of our honor.
It's a great point, because the worst atrocities in human history come from people who are so convinced they are victims. They get to the point where they feel like we are victims by definition, so everything we do, no matter how extreme, is defensive by its nature. That's what happens. So when you think about Nazi Germany, remember, guys, the Treaty of Versailles put incredibly stringent, rigid conditions on Germany and made it so like they could never pay back their debt. And so you're dealing with mass poverty, no hope in Germany post-World War I. And it was out of that misery and out of that degradation that led to the rise of a charlatan fascist like Hitler. And it was the narrative of this, we're victims, we've been spit on by the world, we've been slapped by the world, we've been disrespected by the world, we're never going to dig our way out of this hole. We need to, basically, in the name of our victimhood, we need to rise above it and, like, make sure it never happens again. And part of that, like, never happen again thing is, well, then you end up doing the worst atrocities anybody's ever seen, and you've rationalized it and dehumanized all those around you, right? And now we're seeing that with Israel doing that to Palestinians. And that's the point, is that you have to realize that you're not just a perpetual victim forever. Like, you can be a victim, but you could also be a victimizer, right? And they don't think of it like that. They don't care. And now they're at the point where all they care about is greater Israel. All they care about is expanding their territory. They stole parts of Syria. They're bombing Lebanon on a regular basis, bombing Yemen on a regular basis, of course, bombing Iran and wanting to bomb Iran more. On top of that, stealing more of the West Bank, resettling and occupying Gaza, which they're working on now as they continue the genocide and try to finish the ethnic cleansing. This is what they're doing. So they've become the devil they're trying to avoid. And I think that's a super important point. So go watch the whole thing. We won't watch the whole thing here, but Peter Beinart is an important voice because he's trying to get across to potentially liberal Zionists, right? Like, hey man, we're done here. But look, to be fair, I really think what the polling shows now is that they're already there. Basically, the only people left in this country that are defending Israel, it's the Republican base. It's like white boomer evangelicals, right? Like, literally only 8% of the Democratic base supports Israel right now. 8%. Basically, everybody's turned on them. So I think the liberal Zionists are there already. So we really are at the point where you don't have to hold people's hand and walk them through it. You don't have to do the like, oh, is this really good for Israel? You can just tell the truth and say this is a genocidal, apartheid, fascist state that's mass murdering people, doing war crimes on a daily basis, and they need to be fucking locked up immediately. And also, we need to come to the realization, ethnostates are bad. You can't believe in secularism and democracy and also believe in an ethnostate. Ethnostates always, by definition, lead to this. Because the logic of an ethnostate is always genocidal. Is always, this one group of people is a class above the others. You're a second class or a third class citizen in this bitch. That the logic of that always leads to exterminationist policies, which is what we're witnessing. So no more ethnostates. So we don't need to hold people's hands and walk them through it anymore. You could say it with your whole chest 10 toes down. We're done with ethnostates. Those days are over. We believe in democracy, and that's what we believe in, and that's what we need in the Middle East. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.